You're talking about regulation, so that brings me to the second question, quite related with the regulation. That we see a noticeable regional difference in sustainable investment practices across borders,
Mm.
leveraging from your global exposure. How have these differences impacted the overall landscape, and what insights can be learned from more effective and locally relevant strategies?
First of all, I think that any successful investment strategy focuses on what is locally required. And so what is required in one part of the world is not necessarily the same as what is required somewhere else. So if I say solve a problem, it means solve a problem locally. That's one thing. Now, having said that, I think that when we look at the investment process, all the way from identifying investment opportunities to the implementation, that's where various filters are being put in place. And those investment strategies, those filters are similar everywhere where we go, but they work differently wherever you are in the world with local solutions. And that is also, I think, the key to success.
As a follow-up, very small, brief follow-up question is that if they're following different strategies locally,
Yeah.
how do you actually standardize them, like in terms of analyzing impact? And also, if there's a global standard or a global regulation, how actually that becomes relevant to what you have mentioned?
So, in my mind, the concepts behind regulations, even if they come from different jurisdictions, are quite similar. And so we can standardize around those concepts. But at the same time, we see, of course, that the implementation locally is different. And this leads to a measurement problem, if you will. And that's why ESG and similar concept providers for data for those have a hard time in providing data. And I think that we need to consider alternatives to just data, because data will be very difficult to measure, let alone standardize. One regime which I think could be an alternative to data could be a certification regime. We see B corporations as one certification regime where a company would be audited. An investee company would be audited, for example, and say, are you paying heed to all your stakeholders? Are you achieving your objectives, even if the measurement of that becomes difficult? And so I think that, as I say, on a conceptual level, we can harmonize around ideas, which are then reflected in regulations. On a local level, you would need, let's say, the audit, be it quantitative or qualitative, to come up with data, or non-quantitative data, non-quantitative information.
There's now a growing debate as well that whether we are focusing a bit too much on ESG, as if like it's being forced upon on many trending markets as well. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with some of the criticisms around ESG. I think ESG was fantastic to start off with, but I think that now we need to take the debate a bit further. And that means that we need to look at organizational purpose. We need to look at values. What values the company actually aspire to? It can be justice, it can be human flourishing, it could be other values, and how these values are being translated into purpose and then into strategy. And so if you want to run a sustainable company, i.e. Also want to be a sustainable investee companies for investors, then those questions need to be asked. How do our values transform into purpose, into strategy, in that order as well? And once you land there, then the chances that you actually reach your goals, call them ESG goals in the past, in my mind, are much more real than focusing on ESG. Also, because there will be trade-offs in your decision making, and those trade-offs in ESG are not so obvious. But the moment that you start talking about purpose and your stakeholders, you will realize that there are different stakeholders, and they require trade-offs, they require communication around it.
Thank you.
Yeah.